Does head coach Erik Spoelstra have too much leeway with the Heat as the team waddles through mediocrity? We look at whether Spo deserves some or none of the blame. Plus, we look ahead to the series versus the Brooklyn Nets, and Wes, they've got to be able to win these games, right?
Some might call them must wins.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Join the cookie gang, become an everydayer. That means subscribing, tuning in every day, Monday through Friday, and signing up for the Everydayer Club with the link in the show notes. I'm Wes Goldberg, host of Locked On NBA Daily and Real GM Radio. I'm here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. Recording this on Tuesday morning before the Heat start a home doubleheader against the Nets. We're going to talk about that matchup here in a minute, plus get to what ended up being a pretty big reveal from Nikola Jović about his back injury. But I want to start today with this clip that was making the rounds on social media yesterday, David. This is from the Dan Le Batard Show, and the clip is captioned, "It's time to have a serious conversation about Erik Spoelstra." And in that clip, they go on to talk about how, because the Heat have been mediocre as a regular season team for half a decade now, and they fail to develop these young players, and they fail to get these superstars. And at what point do we hold people like Erik Spoelstra and the front office accountable? They included the front office within the conversation in the clip in itself within the show. David, we tend to not try to call out other shows and do that kind of thing here on this show, but I do think that there's a responsibility to kind of come in here, right, and to weigh in, because the Le Batard Show has massive influence locally, obviously, and they're an institution, been around forever, and as we're the #1 rated Miami Heat show in South Florida, and I do think we have a responsibility maybe to step in and add some context here, because while I think the question itself of are Erik Spoelstra and this front office untouchable, or maybe rather, what would it take for Spo and this front office to become untouchable? I think that question is an interesting one to ask. I think that's an interesting conversation to have in and of itself. But where I thought the Le Batard crew, and we know people on that show and we like them and everything, I'm not trying to call them out, I'm not trying to do that, but I do think where they missed the mark here is sort of the jumping off point of where they started this conversation. The idea that, the premise that this team isn't maximizing its roster, that this front, that Erik Spoelstra in particular, and we want to start there because the caption singled out Spo specifically. The idea that on the show they're talking about, hey, he's failed to develop these young players, right? It's not up to Spo about whether or not the Heat get these superstar players. That's the front office's job. The idea that they haven't developed these young players, I think, is completely wrong. And we can have the discussion about, and the argument and the debate, and we've had it here on this show about how they've handled Kel'el and the minutes. I don't think we can have that debate, and you can have whatever thoughts you want and opinions you want on that. And I think everybody has basketball reasons behind them, good ones. I don't think there's any argument that Kel'el has not developed. He is clearly, if you look at what he was as a rookie when he first got to the league and where he is now, he is a much better basketball player right now. And that's where I think the premise of where the Le Batard Show was falling short, and where I think it was faulty, was this idea that Spo isn't developing these young. Look at Jaime Jaquez Jr. He might win Sixth Man of the Year this year, right? You look at guys like Bam and Tyler. You might want more for them, but these were guys picked in the middle of the first round. Mm-hmm. Look at that draft that Bam was picked in. Markelle Fultz and Lonzo Ball were the first two picks. You don't think those teams would have rather had Bam? Of course they would have. So this idea that this staff doesn't do a good job of developing young players, I think, is a wrong premise to base that conversation on. But where are you on this?
Yeah, I'm not sure that they were looking at was it specifically just the youth movement that the team isn't developing? Or because I think that is also...
It was the question that they raised to start the conversation. So that's why I said the premise of how they got to that point was faulty.
I made the point recently, and I know you pushed back on it. I don't think Spo has maximized this roster in totality, but I don't think there's any denying that they've gotten the young players to at least contribute. With the exception of Nikola Jović, I think by and large, this team has done a really good job, and Erik Spoelstra specifically has done a good job of getting these young guys to feel comfortable as contributors. Now, do they have off games? Yeah, that's what happens when you're 21 years old and still trying to find your footing. Like Kel'el's in his second year. And to your point, the player that he was when he was first drafted was not a very good one. Like, I mean, he struggled to stay on the court. He didn't have the endurance, the strength. He had some talent, some ability, but there were questions about his drive and his motor leading up to the draft. And I don't think those were answered in a positive way. So I don't know exactly why you would make the point that maybe they haven't developed young players, because I think
what did you find? What did you find? How did you take the clip? Maybe I'm wrong here, but I watched the clip and then I went back and I watched the full show. So I'm just telling you where they came from. But maybe there's an interesting conversation to be had here. How did you take it?
Well, like I said, I think that the bigger question is, have they done enough with the players that they have? And I think that's where I'm kind of on the fence about, because I think the players might not be great, but I think they're good enough so that they don't have to be. Like Bam's recent point, and I know D Wade made his response to Bam. You know, Bam said, "We're better than this. We shouldn't be in the play-in tournament." And Dwayne Wade basically said, "Are you sure?"
Yeah,
because that's
men
kind of
lie,
where you're
women
at
lie,
right now.
numbers don't. You are what your record is, basically.
So I get that. Great teams have struggled through the regular season too. Like, I mean, the big three wasn't exactly knocking people out. All
They
over.
weren't, David. They weren't almost going to miss the playoffs.
No. I know. Look, I get it. You know, at some point during
if that team wanted to win 60 games, they could have. They just didn't. The Dwayne Wade load management thing, and that's a very different story.
I get that. And I look at this roster though, and I think they should be better than where they're at. Their record should be better based on where they're at right now. And so I don't know if that falls on the players just not caring, injuries. It's a combination of those things.
How much
or
better?
Perhaps it's. I'm sorry.
How much better?
I think they should be 5 games better than they are right now. Like 5 more wins. I don't think that's a huge margin.
It's not, like, and that's why I it's almost negligible. Right? Like 5 wins, I understand, makes you the 6th seed or maybe competing for that 5th spot in the East. And I get that. Is that materially different than what the Heat are right now as a top seed in the play-in tournament? I don't think the conversation overall of this team has been mediocre for half a decade. And the fact that we don't, the way we do locally, we call out the Miami Dolphins, the Miami Marlins, the Florida Panthers, right? Like the Miami Hurricanes for sure. I mean, these teams get called out after one bad year. Or not even bad, one mediocre year, one disappointing season. You could argue since 2022, every season since then, every regular season has been disappointing. Take the 2023 finals run out of this. Regular season, every single one of them has been disappointing. And that's why you see Bam get so exasperated about the fact that this team is going to be in the play-in tournament probably yet again. And why he continues to say, and Spo continues to say, and this group continues to say, we're better than this, where my point has been, I don't think you are materially better than this. Maybe I thought last year, and I was on this show, I called out Spo multiple times. I thought he cost the Heat real games last year. I thought he did his worst coaching job that he did in a very long time. Does that change the fact that the Heat were going to... I don't think that Heat team gets out of the first round anyway, right? If they were playing Cleveland or somebody else in the first round, maybe we could have that, They weren't doing anything materially different.
They didn't get swept by the Cavs because of Erik Spoelstra.
Right. And so I do think that, let's say they won 5 more games because you think that Spo hasn't done a good job maximizing the roster. This is the point that I made yesterday on Twitter specifically, is that it's so easy for content creators and analysts to come in and blame the coaching when things aren't going right. Because we don't see 99% of what actual coaching in the NBA is. And I think we have a conversation around NBA coaching that is very similar to the conversation we have around NFL coaching. And in the NFL, we see, I would argue, 90% of the coaching. We see all of it. They call every play on both sides of the ball. We talk to, media talks to them, and every position coach throughout the week. We see the game plan. Like, football is chess, and the coach is the chess player, right? We see all of the moves. In the NBA, it's very different. The NBA is like a Picasso painting or something like that, where you're just like, I'm not really sure I see what's going on here, right? Or a Jackson Pollock, where you're just like, I'm not, like, what's going on? I'm not really, this is art. Yeah. I don't really, it's more about the process necessarily than the result.
I think the conversation would change if we were allowed to have practices opened up again.
I think you're right. I think that's a very good point, David, and maybe that's a reason why we should open up. Although Spo is not really worried for his job security. We're going to continue this conversation. Plus, Nikola Jović made a pretty big reveal about his back injury at yesterday's practice. After it, does not sound good. We'll talk about that next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. Skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I'll be talking to you, companies like yours will have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time and more time actually interviewing candidates and who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Being part of the Cookie Gang and becoming an everydayer comes with some great perks, including ad-free shows. Plus, if you join the All Access tier, you get even more, including text messages and updates from us, like running game notes, injury news, transaction rumors around the trade deadline, draft, and offseason, all sent directly to you via text. You'll also get a chance to text us questions for post-game shows. If you're interested in being part of the Cookie Gang and joining the Everydayer Club, tap the link in the show notes or head to lockedonheat.supercast.com to learn more. We'll talk about Nikola Jović here in a second and the big reveal he made about his injury. Plus, we'll look ahead to tonight's game, the first game of a doubleheader at home against the Brooklyn Nets. But continuing this conversation about coaching, David, like I said, I think coaching is like an iceberg. I think we see the top 1% of it, and we analyze the top 1% as content creators and analysts and people and I think it's a big mistake. I think we don't see 99% of what goes on in coaching. And so what we judge is things like rotation, playing time, when a coach calls a timeout, ATOs and sideline out of bounds plays, which is why Brad Stevens was anointed greatest coach ever, and then it turns out he didn't really have what it took to stay being a head coach in Boston, and he just decided to go into a front office role. With Spo, and I think and I think the secondary problem with that, with people like Erik Spoelstra, is, well, we don't see the fact that he is maximizing and developing his players. And so what we see on the court is, and when it's mediocre, we say, well, it should be more, shouldn't it? But maybe that is it. Maybe that's all there is. And I do think that Spo, and we can, we want to argue about 3, 4, 5 wins here and there. Okay, I guess. But materially, I don't think there's a 60-win team sitting here. And we tend to, like the coach of the year conversation, for instance, we look at a 60-win team and we say, wow, that coach did a great job maximizing that group. That team won 60 games. That coach did a great job. But what if there's a team that wins 40 games?
Yeah.
Did that coach not maximize that group? Maybe the best that team is a 40-win team. Maybe that coach did a better job. Maybe that coach took a 20-win team and turned it into a 40-win team. But that coach doesn't get coach of the year because we don't see a 40-win team being maximized, because there's this like baseline assumption that everybody should be able to win 50-plus games in the NBA. Maybe subconsciously, but that's sort of my point with Erik Spoelstra. I do not think that the Miami Heat are blameless for the fact that they've been mediocre for half a decade now. I don't think that that's true. Maybe I come off as an Erik Spoelstra apologist here. And like I said, I think that there are things that he could do better. I think the Kel'el Ware stuff is head-scratching. I do not think if he plays Kel'el Ware or starts Kel'el Ware, if he plays Kel'el Ware 18 minutes a game versus 14 minutes a game, or starts him instead of playing him in the middle of the game, I don't think that we're looking at a team that is what it is right now, mediocre, versus a team that's competing with the Knicks and the Cavs and the Pistons and the Boston Celtics at the top of the East. I don't think Kel'el Ware's minutes turn that team into that team. So I look at the front office and I say, those are the people that do need to be held accountable. And I've done that over and over again on this show. I just don't think coaching is where we have to have this conversation.
it's a tough nuance to break down because what separates Miami from those teams at the top? And I've always had an issue with this idea of talent. What the hell is talent? Is it the ability to jump an inch or two higher? Is it your ability to dribble a little faster? Is it the ability to knock down a shot much more regularly? Like, I mean, is Steph Curry talented, or did he just work incredibly diligently to find a very specific thing that he had been building slowly over the course of his life by virtue of training as a son of an NBA great shooter?
I would argue he's talented. We have never seen
how?
somebody shoot.
How? What? Yeah. How? Why? What is it?
Because you and I can shoot.
He's my
a
height.
Three-pointer. Yeah,
he's my height. Like, it's not like he's a great athlete or anything like that.
Correct.
Doug.
He's got supernatural ability to throw a ball in the air and make that.
That wasn't an innate. That's the thing.
There's part of it that's innate. People have done the thing on the hand-eye coordination and all that kind of stuff.
That's a skill that you develop. That's a skill that he's developed. Like, we see the training where he's dribbling a tennis ball and having a ping pong ball thrown at him or something ridiculous like that. Following the laser with your eyes.
Of everybody in the world who has worked hard on their three-point shot, for this one man, a skill that, by the way, you and I, because I understand your point on talent. Like, you and I can't dunk the way that, like, prime Blake Griffin can dunk. Like, that's just a talent or a skill or whatever that is.
Yeah.
You and I can shoot a three-pointer.
Sure.
We can take a ball and throw it at the basket from beyond the arc. Anybody, most 99% of the population can do that. The fact that this one man is so much better at it than everybody else on the planet, there is something else going on there. That's all I'm saying. We can call it divine intervention. We can call it something.
I don't think so.
You just think he literally worked harder on it than everybody else. I refuse to believe that.
The kid was shooting three-pointers at 4. When I was too busy watching cartoons, he was out on an NBA court putting up shots.
Other NBA players shot threes at 4 years old. All the origin stories are the same for these guys.
And he's not bad either. So to your overall point, to your greater point. Okay, so
I think let's not call it
how
talent.
It ties into this conversation.
Okay.
So to me, what I'm saying is that what separates a player being great versus just good enough is the work put in. And who has to oversee that work aside from the individual player is the coach. Now, we've heard all these great stories about young assistant
Bam's
Erik
not going to shoot the three like Steph Curry. I don't care how much work he puts in.
I'm not saying that necessarily. We've heard all these great stories about young assistant Erik Spoelstra pushing Dwayne Wade. Yeah, Dwayne had incredible talent. We saw that in the Final Four, whatever. We knew that he was going to be great. He was drafted 5th overall. But what took him from great draft pick, which we see great draft picks bust all the time, or at least not become Hall of Famers.
Right.
Yeah. What separated him was the work and the drive, etc. Now, I know that an individual player has to have it, but it's also up to the coach to try and draw that out of him and push them to that point. Maybe nobody on this roster possesses the athleticism, to your point, to be able to become a superstar. But at some point, it's how much work you're putting in to develop whatever it is that can make you great. I don't know. Like, can Bam at this point works exclusively on dribbling skills?
Steph was doing it since he was 4.
Right.
That's before Mark Jackson ever got a hold of him. Right.
Yeah, I know.
So there's a point that when you make
really a Hall of Fame coach, or did he just kind of be like, you know what? I'm glad Dell was your dad. You know,
I mean, I do think that Bam's touch could be better. Bam has the athleticism, to your point. He's a top, 5% athlete in the NBA, but there's he's just, I don't care how much work. Like, for example, like, could you just, like, these undrafted players, a guy like Caleb Martin, who came in and turned himself from out of the league into a role player for this team. Don't you think that this coaching staff maximized Caleb Martin, or are you arguing with more work he could have become Jimmy Butler?
That's a tough one, but I think he became a really good player. Like, that's
I think he topped out. That's as much as he's going to be ever.
Maybe you're right. Maybe there's only so much more work. Who knows? I don't know. Look, we've all heard stories about Jimmy being maniacal in everything that he's done. Like, we assume this version of Jimmy is very different.
Right.
Sorry, I just lost. We know about Jimmy Butler being maniacal about everything. How much more work did he put in behind the scenes, those late night practices, instead of playing dominoes? This version that we've seen of him lately, where he's already achieved this level, we know that he's worked hard to get there. So he was just a late draft pick too. Did he become a potential Hall of Fame player by virtue of work, or did he have some kind of innate ability? And look, you look at a specific player this year, Jalen Duren. Jalen was a young player who hadn't quite figured it out. Did Bernie Bickerstaff push him to the next level? I don't know. At some point, he became an all-star this year. That potential may have already been there, but somebody has to help draw it out of you or put you in a position to succeed. And that's where I think Erik Spoelstra has done a pretty good job, and maybe there's another level for him to take even more so. And I'm sure he would say the same thing, that maybe he could specifically help get a player to be a little bit better. And if that's the case, that's the difference. That's the difference between a win or two here.
You're talking about a win or two. I'm talking about mediocre, middle of the pack in the East, which a win or two doesn't change middle of the pack in the East.
If each player on the roster contributes to a win or two, yeah, it does. That's the whole thing. That's what I'm talking about. Like, you're talking about like 3 or 4 players that can help swing the course of a season because they have 1 or 2 games. One of them might be Kel'el Ware. One of them might be Bam Adebayo.
But so I guess already achieved. You're presuming that already hasn't happened. There have been games where Kel'el Ware swung those already. That's what I'm talking about. Is we always see what's in front of us and always ask for more. And for some reason, that always falls on the coaching staff. Across sports, we do this.
It falls on the players too.
Kel'el Ware has swung games this season. Bam has swung games this season. Tyler and Norm have swung games this season. Tyler Hero won that game against Dallas when he came back. Like, these are things that have already happened, and yet we're sitting here being like, well, this team isn't where we want it to be, and so we want to ask for more. And I'll say this again. The season has taken some weird twists and turns. And Spo is not without criticism. I am not sitting here saying that Spo is absolutely void of criticism. But going into the season, what did we think this Heat team was? Potentially competing for 5 or 6. Are they all that different than that right now? Not really. Like, we could have this arbitrary play-in tournament versus not, whatever it is. It's kind of the same thing. You're not a serious player in the Eastern Conference, whether you're the 5th seed or the 7th seed. And so
the goal was home court advantage, and I think we thought that they'd be able to achieve that. To be the 4th best team in the Eastern Conference.
Stretch goal, we talked about that perhaps, but if you would have asked me where I was asked on this program and other programs, where do you think the Heat finish? I said 6th. I said they end up 6th in the East. Okay. And so maybe they finish 7th. I don't think that's all that different.
Maybe.
To your earlier question about what the difference is between the top teams and this one, we can have that argument about what talent is if we want. I think the answer is production, right? You get 30 points per game from Jaylen Brown. The Heat are not getting that from anybody. You get 25 and 10 from Cade Cunningham. The Heat are not getting that from anybody. Everything. Donovan Mitchell putting up an MVP type season, 30 points per game. You're not getting that from anybody on this roster. We can have the argument maybe it's coaching, but I can also just look at this team and say nobody on this team has ever done that. And Jaylen Brown is a Finals MVP. Donovan Mitchell has a track record with 2 different teams putting up these kinds of numbers. James Harden has a track record with 1 million different teams putting up these kinds of numbers. Cade Cunningham was a number 1 pick in his draft and projected to be exactly this. And he is doing it and delivering on that. I don't know how much coaching has to do with any of the. Jaylen Brown has played for 2 different coaches. Like, I don't know. I just think that we tend to put too much. It's not that Spo is without blame, but I have a problem with us putting all of the blame on Spo and being like, this guy isn't doing this, where in reality, he probably is doing it, and we're just not seeing it. Nikola Jović, or last word on this, David, because I don't want to go to break without giving you a chance to respond here. So a quick response, and then we'll get to the Jović stuff.
I think it's incumbent of the coach to try and put a player in a position to win, and then a player has to do everything they can to become the best version of themselves. And like, everybody's doing work behind the scenes, and that includes the players themselves. Like, their late night shooting sessions, there's extra work done over the off season. There's everything possible to become the best player you can. And I think it all has wound up leading to this season where maybe players could have been better than they've been. And I think the coach hasn't necessarily done a great job of putting those players in the best position to win. So I don't know. It's a combination of things. And I think the conversation would be very different if they were 5 games better, which is the difference I'm talking about, because then you're looking at teams like, well, can they be a 4th seed in the Eastern Conference? And do they have a chance at realistically beating one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference? Because I think that's the conversation that would be surrounding them, instead of, oh, why hasn't Erik Spoelstra done enough to get them out of the play-in tournament?
Let us know what you think in the comment section. Clearly, David and I disagree a little bit on this. Very interested to see where people fall on this. I was actually very surprised by the amount of people who agreed with me that's on Twitter when I made the point that I did there. But very interested to see what you all think. Leave a comment on YouTube. Let us know what you think about how much coaching is to blame here for Miami being mediocre in the regular season for half a decade here. Meanwhile, Nikola Jović, big reveal about what his back injury really is, plus a little preview of tonight's game against the Brooklyn Nets. We'll talk about it next.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. March is a time to celebrate women, especially around International Women's Day, and to recognize just how much they carry at work, in relationships, in families, and in all the unseen roles they step into every single day. It's easy to celebrate that strength, and it's just as important to make space for their emotional well-being. And honestly, that goes for all of us. Look, I've seen a lot of things online about just how much women silently carry in their lives. And I know it might be easy for most of the people listening to this podcast to kind of shrug it off and maybe ignore it. But the reality is that there is so much more that women do emotionally, psychologically, within the context of their jobs, their families. The idea that, oh, maybe a woman doesn't even, what we take for granted as men, being able to walk safely from our cars at night, that's not something, a luxury that most women get to carry. And so you think about that kind of drain, the constant pressure it puts on them, and you know it. If you talk to any woman in your life, you'll be able to hear about it, because that's something that they tangibly feel that maybe most men do not. And that being the case, therapy can help to kind of understand that pressure that they're dealing with, not just for the women in your life, but for the men in your life as well, creating balance, setting healthy boundaries, and supporting your overall well-being. And with 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 6 million people served worldwide, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform. And it works. You just fill out a questionnaire, you get matched with a licensed therapist, and if it's not the right fit, you switch at any time. Your emotional well-being matters. Find support and feel lighter in therapy. Sign up today and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedNBA. That's betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. College basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night, from early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts. There's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want, rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever fits your read. You can mix spreads, totals, player props, whatever you want to match how you see the slate playing out. And then you apply your profit boost and instantly bump up the potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride with the team you've been following all season. It's your parlay, your style, now with even more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Let's jump into some of the news here before we wrap up today's show. Nikola Jović was talking to reporters after practice yesterday and talked a little bit more about this lower back injury that has been not only keeping him out for several games, but apparently bothering him all season long. I'm going to give you the full quote here. This is from the Miami Herald. Anthony Chang wrote the story. Quote, "My discs are great, and I think that's the more important thing. As the doctor said before, my bones were not strong enough for the load that I had. I guess I was really young before to have all of that load. Right now, my back is kind of firing up, and I got some inflammation in a few parts. That's what's bothering me," end quote. So the discs are fine, right? The discs in the spine are fine, which is good, obviously. And, you know, Chang went on to write that this was not related to his rookie. Remember, Jović missed half his rookie year because of a back injury. This is not related. At least Nico does not think it is. But I hear things like his bones were not strong enough, and my ears perk up a little bit. That doesn't sound awesome for me. And we've seen players, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is the case with Nico right now. I'm just pointing this out. We've seen players 6'11" taller than that, like Nico is, at 6'10", 6'11"-ish. Just their bodies not hold up under the pressure of playing professional basketball and playing an 82-game season and playing as many games as they've played throughout. And Nico does not really take breaks, right? He plays a lot of overseas stuff during the summers and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of pressure that he's put on his body over the years, but that's how this happens, right? And when I see stuff like this, it sounds to me like he has a lot of work to do in strengthening and conditioning his back, David. And look, I had scoliosis, and I had scoliosis surgery at the beginning of high school. It is hard when I have spent my life since then trying to strengthen my back to reduce inflammation. And I got to tell you, to this day, it's still chronic. issues every once in a while. Like, there's a lot of work and a lot of maintenance that goes into keeping your back okay so that you can walk every day without pain. And that's just me as a non-NBA player walking around just trying to live life, not a 6'10" guy trying to play NBA games and bang bodies with guys sometimes twice his size. I look at this and I'm a little concerned, honestly.
No, every time you talk about back injuries, it's a huge concern, especially for an NBA player. As you said, like the size of the body and the stress that it goes through, those things are difficult. Like, you look at a player like Tracy McGrady, and there have been countless numbers, more than I can't even remember off the top of my head, but Tracy McGrady, a Hall of Fame player, who knows how much better he could have been? Maybe even one of the all-time greats, even beyond what he was. Had back, I remember reading, daily headlines about whether or not he was going to be sidelined or back spasms taking him out from game-to-game basis. Like, those things do make a difference there. So, you just hope that Nico can figure it out. And I don't even know. Like, I mean, maybe you can speak to it, but like, you talk about strengthening bones. Like, what are you going to do to strengthen bones? It kind of feels like that's the hand you're dealt when it comes to bone strengthening.
A lot of milk, right? A lot of whole milk.
I mean, yeah, there's only so much calcium supplements you can take to strengthen those bones. And I know it's about surrounding the tissue and strengthening that as much as possible so that you can withstand the impact of day-to-day. But you wonder if that's starting to take its toll already at a young player. And it does not bode well. So hopefully he can figure it out. And look, I mean, I know the injury is one thing, and I know that his up and down season was already problematic enough as it is, but you just hope that he gets better and is able to stay healthy out there, because he's under contract and he's a good person. He's a good guy that has been fun to talk to over the course of his career, and he's a young player, and I think every young player deserves a chance to thrive in today's league.
One of my favorites in that locker room, one of our favorites in that locker room, to your point.
No,
obviously hope for the best for Nico, one of our favorites to talk to at Media Day and everything. He's very, very generous with his time. But, if there's the optimist in me says, well, the Heat have had this guy since the draft. If they were that concerned about his back being a long-term thing, they wouldn't have signed him to this extension. But the problem with back injuries is they do deteriorate. Right. And maybe this is something that they didn't necessarily foresee, and I don't know that they deserve a lot of blame. That we could talk about the contract extension, but we're not going to do that right now.
Sure.
Let's talk quickly about tonight's game against the Brooklyn Nets. It's the first of a 2-game homestand for Miami. Tuesday night, Thursday night against the same Brooklyn Nets team tonight. Brooklyn will be without Yegor Demon and Drake Powell. Miami's going to be without Norm Powell, who's still out with the groin injury, and Davion Mitchell is questionable with a shoulder injury, so TBD on Mitchell's status. The Nets enter tonight's game losing 8 straight games. Over the last 15, they ranked 29th in offensive rating, which means there's only one team that's worse. The good news for Brooklyn is that they're all the way up to 27th in defensive rating, so they're not quite as bad as they are on offense. There's no the Heat. I don't care about Norm Powell. I don't care about David Mitt. The Heat should win this game. They need to win this game. This is a must-win game. You cannot drop these in this playoff race and try not only to keep moving up in the Eastern Conference standings, but potentially hold off Charlotte, who you're going to be playing on Friday night.
Yeah, no, you have to win these games. I'm not going to say mush. They have to win these games, undoubtedly.
Oh, we're past
I'm concerned. Yeah, I think it's a level beyond mush. Like, you cannot.
Wow.
Like, at this point, if you do not win either of these games, if you lose either of these games, sit everybody for the rest of the season. I know that's hyperbolic, and I don't care. I think if you're gonna fall apart for whatever reason, I don't care if you start Keshad Johnson, Simone Fontecchio, and my grandmother, who's been dead for a long time. You have to beat the Brooklyn Nets.
Yes.
Like, somehow you have to figure it out. And if you don't, then everybody else should just be like, you know what? Go to Cancun early, baby.
By the way, the Nets are telling the Nets are saying, you have to beat us. Yeah, please beat us. That's our whole thing. That's what we're doing right now. It's our whole thing.
I do not like comments from Danny Wolf recently when he spoke to media, and he was asked about the losing and everything else like this. And he made a great point. Like, all the players on that Nets roster, they're losing collectively now, but entering their stints as Brooklyn Nets, they were all really great players on really great teams that won a lot of games. They're used to winning. So this is a whole completely different thing. And my concern is if Wolf's comments kind of sparks a little collective rage in that locker room and says, you know what? Because losing sets in, and I've seen it. I've been covering that Magic team, and I wasn't covering the Magic. I was just covering the NBA through the Orlando Magic locker room, same as you were in Sacramento games not that long ago. And every media day, it was this incredibly boundless enthusiasm. We're going to make the playoffs. We're really talented. We're a contending team. 15-48 later, you know what? Maybe you're not contenders. And that losing just kind of piles up and piles up and piles up, and you just can't shake the stink off of it.
Yeah, did you?
And so
we signed Aaron Aflalo. This is our year.
Yeah, exactly.
We got Terrence Ross.
Exactly.
The
The Human Torch.
Human Torch. Look, Brooklyn has lost 8 straight. They're not going to lose every game for the rest of the year, no matter how badly they want to. They're almost due. Please, Heat. At home.
Wait, 2 more games.
Just take care. You got 2 games, 2 chances to blow this. Do not blow this. Win these games. Set up an awesome Friday night game against the Charlotte Hornets, which could potentially be for the division. But we'll talk about the Brooklyn Nets game after that game. Tune in for the post-game reaction. But for now, thanks for tuning in today to Locked On Heat. Make sure you subscribe, follow Locked On Heat so you get all of the latest episodes. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Join the Cookie Gang and get Locked On Heat ad-free. Plus, members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonheat.supercast.com to join the club.